Good morning, everyone. We are starting today with the Vishnu Mahapurana, Book 2, Chapter 7. Last time we were in the middle of cosmology of the different lokas, bhuloka, and we went over the lower lokas, the patalas and naraka and so on. And now we go into the cosmology. There's more of bhuloka, but also of the heavens, the higher lokas. Maitreya said, the sphere of the whole earth, the bhumandala, has been, sphere, funnily enough, is actually a mistranslation here, the circle. The bhumandala of the earth has been described to me by you, excellent Brahmana, and I am now desirous to hear an account of the other lokas above the world, bhuvarloka and the rest, and the situation and the dimensions of the celestial luminaries. Parashara said, the bhurloka, comprehending its oceans, mountains, and rivers, extends as far as it is illuminated by the rays of the sun and moon, meaning until you hit the loka parvata, the mountain barrier that divides the world from the outer darkness. And to the same extent, both in diameter and circumference, the bhuvarloka spreads above it as far upwards as to the svaraloka, which starts as soon as you get past Dhruvataru, or celestially north of the pole star. The solar orb is situated 100,000 yojanas from the earth, and that of the moon an equal distance from the sun. These distances, again, the whole thing doesn't make sense if you think of it relative to the spherical earth that we live on. This is talking about planes relative to the plane of the Earth's ecliptic. It's an entirely different model that's being described here. At the same interval above the moon occurs the orbit of all the lunar constellations, the nakshatras. The Graha Buddha is 200,000 leagues above the lunar mansions. Shukra is at the same distance from Buddha. Angaraka is as far above Shukra, and the priest of the Devas, Brihaspati, as far from Angaraka, whilst Shani is 250,000 yojanas beyond Brihaspati. The Loka of the Saptarishis, which corresponds to the constellation Ursa Major in the Western terminology, is 100,000 yojanas above Shani, and at a similar height above the Saptarishis is Dhruva, the pole star, the pivot or axis of the whole planetary circle. Such, Maitreya, is the elevation of the three lokas, Bhur, Bhuvar, Svar, which forms the region of the consequences of karma. The region of karma is here, in Bhurloka, and indeed in only Bharatavarsham. Above Dhruva, at the distance of 10 million yojanas, lies the Loka of saints, or Maharloka, the inhabitants of which dwell in it throughout a kalpa, or day of Brahma. At twice that distance, further up in the sense of celestially, is situated Janaloka, where Sanandana and other pure-minded sons of Brahma reside. At 4 times the distance between the two last, further up, lies the Tapoloka, inhabited by the deities called Vaibhrajas, who are unconsumable by fire. Unconsumable by fire does not mean merely that they cannot be burned, but that their world is not reached by the fires of pralaya that destroy the lower worlds. At 6 times the distance, or 120 million yojanas further, is situated Satyaloka, the sphere of truth, the inhabitants of which never again know death. Wherever earthy substance exists, which may be traveled by the feet, that constitutes the Bhurloka, the dimensions of which I have already recounted to you. The region that extends from the earth to the sun in which the siddhas and other celestial beings move is the atmospheric or the bhuvarloka, which also I have described. The interval between the sun and Dhruva, extending 1400,000 yojanas, is called by those who are acquainted with the system of the universe the Svaraloka, or the heavenly sphere. These three spheres are termed transitory. The three highest, Jana, Tapa, and Satya, are styled durable, in that the transitory or more transitory spheres are destroyed and recreated every kalpa, whereas the higher ones, Jana, Tapa, and Satya, survive the transitions between kalpas and are dissolved and regenerated only upon the death and the death of Brahma and the birth of a new Brahma. Maharuloka, as situated between the two, has also a mixed character, for although it is deserted at the end of the kalpa, it is not destroyed. Because it is affected by pralaya, but not completely destroyed by it, but the effects of the pralaya render it uninhabitable temporarily. These 7 lokas, together with the patalas, so the 7 other lokas below, forming the extent of the whole world, I have thus, Maitreya, explained to you. The world is encompassed on every side, and above and below, by the shell of the egg of Brahma, in the same manner as the seed of the wood apple is invested by its rind. Around the outer surface of the shell flows water, for a space equal to 10 times the diameter of the world. The waters again are encompassed exteriorly by fire, fire by air, and air by mind, mind by the origin of the elements, ahankara, and that by intellect. Each of these extends 10 times the breadth of that which it encloses, and the last is encircled by the chief principle, pradhana, which is infinite and its extent cannot be enumerated. It is therefore called the boundless and illimitable cause of all existing things, supreme nature or prakriti, the cause of all mundane eggs, of which there are thousands and tens of thousands, and millions and thousands of millions, such as has been described, all of those being universes. Within pradhana resides soul, diffusive, conscious, and self-irradiating, as fire is inherent in flint or sesamum oil in its seed. Pradhana and puman, nature and soul, are both of the character of dependence, and are encompassed by the energy of Vishnu, which is one with the soul of the world, and which is the cause of the separation of those two, soul and nature, at the period of dissolution, of their aggregation in the continuance of things, and of their combination at the season of creation. In the same manner as the wind ruffles the surface of water in 100 bubbles, which of themselves are inert, in other words, bubbles do not cause themselves, only by disturbance of the water, so the energy of Vishnu influences the world consisting of inert nature and soul. Again, as a tree consisting of root, stem, and branches springs from a primitive seed and produces other seeds, whence grow other trees, analogous to the first in species, product, and origin, so from the first unexpended germ of nature or pradhana spring mahat, intellect, and the other rudiments of things. From them proceed the grosser elements, and from them humans and gods, who are succeeded by sons and the sons of sons. And the growth of a tree from the seed, no detriment occurs to the parent plant, neither is there any waste of beings by the generation of others. In like manner as space and time and the rest are the cause of the tree, so the divine Hari is the cause of all things by successive developments. As all the parts of the future plant existing in the seed of rice, or the root, the culm, the leaf, the shoot, the stem, the bud, the fruit, the milk, the grain, the chaff, the ear, spontaneously evolve when they are in approximation with the subsidiary means of growth, such as earth and water, so gods, humans, and other beings involved in many actions, or necessarily existing in those states which are the consequences of good or evil acts, become manifested only in their full growth through the influence of the energy of Vishnu. This Vishnu is the supreme spirit, Brahman, from whence all this world proceeds, who is the world, by whom the world subsists and in whom it will be resolved. That spirit, or Brahman, is the supreme state of Vishnu, which is the essence of all that is visible or invisible, with which all that is identical, and whence all animate and inanimate existence is derived. He is primary nature. He, in a perceptible form, is the world, and in him all finally melts. Through him all things endure. He is the performer of the rites of devotion. He is the rite. He is the fruit which it bestows. He is the implements by which it is performed. There is nothing besides the illimitable Hari. Chapter 8. Parashara said, having thus described to you the system of the world in general, I will now explain to you the dimensions and situations of the sun and other luminaries. And now we enter into a elaborate metaphor here, which makes sense only if you really have the visualization of the Puranic cosmological world model. The chariot of the sun is 9,000 yojanas in length, and the pole is of twice that longitude. The axle is 15,700,000 yojanas long, on which is fixed a wheel with 3 naves, 5 spokes, and 6 peripheries, consisting of the ever-during year, the whole constituting the circle or wheel of time. The chariot has another axle, which is 4,500 yojanas long. The 2 halves of the yoke are of the same length, respectively, as the 2 axles, the longer and the shorter. The short axle with the short yoke is supported by the pole star. The end of the longer axle, to which the wheel of the car is attached, moves on the Manasa mountain. The 7 horses of the sun's car are the chandas of the Vedas, the meters: Gayatri, Brihati, Ushni, Jagati, Trashtub, Anushtub, and Pankti. So basically what we're describing here, we've previously gone through the description of the Bhumandala, the Earth circle, not having very little connection. I don't want to say no connection, but very little connection to the spherical Earth planet that we experience, but being a vast plane of a diameter almost on par with a great part of the diameter of our entire solar system, corresponding in situation to the plane of the Earth's ecliptic. And actually, here is why we know it is the ecliptic, because in astronomy, in observational astronomy, the Earth's ecliptic is the flat plane that you get by drawing the orbit of the sun around the Earth, by which we do not mean gravitationally the sun orbits the Earth, but from the perspective of the Earth, relatively, the sun does do a circle around it. And if you draw a plane that traces the sun as it moves around the Earth, you end up with a flat plane that you can conceptually extend out into space. That is the Earth's ecliptic, and that is also where the plane of Bhumandala lies, because the sun traces around the edge of it on top of the Manasotara mountain, the ridge on its edge, on its rim, which is what's described here by the wheel of the sun's car moving atop the Manasa mountain, yoked to Mount Meru in the center and to the pole star above. It's the world being here described is an otherworldly model of these higher celestial lokas and even higher celestial dimensions of the Earth loka, that it actually is a very coherent, it makes sense. You can draw this out and it's consistent. The dimensions all make sense, the measurements all make sense, but it's so different from the world that we see from our material level here that it can be tricky to get the visualization of it unless you really go over this slowly. The city of Indra is situated on the eastern side of the Manasotara mountain, that of Yama on the southern face, that of Varuna on the west, and that of Soma on the north, named severally Vasvokasara, Samyamani, Mukhya or Sukha, and Vibhavari. The glorious sun, Maitreya, darts like an arrow on his southern course, attended by the constellations of the zodiac. He causes the difference between day and night, and is the divine vehicle and path of the sages who have overcome the inflictions of the world. Whilst the sun, who is the discriminator of all hours, shines in one continent in midday, in the opposite dvipas, Maitreya, it will be midnight. Rising and setting are at all seasons, and are always relatively opposed in the different cardinal and intermediate points of the horizon. This, of course, we all know to be true. Well, it's simply saying that where it's midday in one continent, it will be midnight in the other, that the sun is always rising and always setting. It's not rising and setting are not conditions of the sun, they're conditions of relative location to the sun. When the sun becomes visible to any people, to them he is said to rise. When he disappears from their view, that is called by them his setting. There is in truth neither rising nor setting of the sun, for he is always, and these terms merely imply his presence and his disappearance relative to an observer. When the sun at midday passes over either of the cities of the gods on Manasotara mountain at the cardinal points, his light extends to 3 cities and 2 intermediate points. When situated in an intermediate point, he illuminates 2 of the cities and 3 intermediate points, in either case 1 hemisphere. In other words, for example, if the sun is located, if the wheel of the sun's chariot is located in the city of Indra, on due east, then that city, the city of Soma in the north and the city of Yama in the south, are all illuminated with daylight. And so are 2 intermediate points, the northeast and the southeast, and so on as you go around. In other words, at all times, the sun illuminates half of the overall Bhumandala. From the period of his rise, the sun moves with increasing rays until noon, when he proceeds toward his setting with rays diminishing. The east and west quarters are so called from the sun's rising and setting there. As far as the sun shines in front, so far he shines behind and on either hand, illuminating all places except the summit of Meru, the mountain of the immortals. For when his rays reach the court of Brahma, which is there situated, they are repelled and driven back by the overpowering radiance which there prevails. Consequently, there is always the alternation of day and night, according as the divisions of the continent lie in the northern or southern quarter, or inasmuch as they are situated north or south of Meru. In other words, in the higher dimension of Bhumandala, of this overwhelmingly expanded greater earth described in the Puranas, night is the shadow of Mount Meru. We're not talking about a spherical earth planet that the sun goes behind, or that rotates. The sun is always on the horizon. If you're in the middle, like in Jambudvipa, in Bharatavarsha, if you are experiencing reality as here described, not the way we see it today, but if you are in this dimension or plane of the expanded Bhumandala, the sun is never overhead. Never, at any time of the year, is the sun high in the sky. It is always riding around the horizon, like an equinox in the above the Arctic Circle or below the Antarctic Circle. It is always riding on the horizon. It never rises or sets below or above the horizon. It rises or sets from out behind the mountain Meru, which is a gigantic structure, fairly close at hand, which half the time casts a shadow, which is night. That's what's being described here. It's a very different reality from ours. The radiance of the solar orb, when the sun has set, is accumulated in fire, and hence fire is visible at a greater distance by night than by day. During the latter, a fourth of the rays of fire blend with those of the sun, and from their union, the sun shines with greater intensity by day. Fire here meaning Agni Tattva, the energy of Agni Deva. Elemental light and heat derived from the sun or from fire, blending with each other, mutually prevail in various proportions, both by day and night. When the sun is present, either in the southern or the northern hemisphere, day or night retires into the waters, according as they are invaded by darkness or light. It is from this cause that the waters look dark by day, because night is within them, and they look white by night, because at the setting of the sun the light of day takes refuge in their bosom. When the sun has traveled in the center of Pushkara, a 30th part of the circumference of the globe, his course is equal in time to one muhurta, or 48 minutes by our modern time measurements, and whirling round like the circumference of the wheel of a potter. He did that again. The wheel of a potter really kind of gives the visual of the sun riding the rim of a circle. He distributes day and night upon the earth. In the commencement of his northern course, the sun passes to Capricornus, thence to Aquarius, thence to Pisces, going successively from one sign of the zodiac to another. After he has passed through these, the sun attains his equinoctial movement, the vernal equinox, when he makes the day and night of equal duration. Thenceforward, the length of the night decreases and the day becomes longer, until the sun reaches the end of Gemini, when he pursues a different direction, and entering Cancer begins his declension to the south. As the circumference of a potter's wheel revolves most rapidly, so the sun travels rapidly on his southern journey. He flies along his path with the velocity of wind and traverses a great distance in a short time. In 12 muhurtas, he passes through 13 lunar asterisms and a half during the day, and during the night he passes through the same distance only in 18 muhurtas. As the center of the potter's wheel revolves more slowly than the circumference, so the sun in his northern path again revolves with less rapidity, and moves over a less space of the earth in a longer time, until at the end of his northern route the day is again 18 muhurtas and the night 12, the sun passing through half the lunar mansions by day and by night in those periods respectively. As the lump of clay on the center of the potter's wheel moves most slowly, so the polar star, which is in the center of the zodiacal wheel, revolves very tardily and ever remains in the center, as the clay continues in the center of the wheel of the potter. The relative length of the day or night depends upon the greater or less velocity with which the sun revolves through the degrees between the 2 points of the horizon. In the solstitial period, in which his diurnal path is quickest, his nocturnal is slowest, and in that in which he moves quick by night, he travels slowly by day. The extent of his journey is in either case the same, for in the course of the day and night he passes through all the signs of the zodiac, or 6 by night and the same number by day. The length and shortness of the days are measured by the extent of the signs, and the duration of day and night by the period which the sun takes to pass through them. In his northern declination, the sun moves quickest by night and slowest by day. In his southern declination, the reverse is the case. The night is called Usha, and the day is denominated Vyushta, and the interval between them is called Sandhya. On the occurrence of the awful Sandhya, the terrific fiends termed the Mandehas attempt to devour the sun, for Brahma denounced this curse upon them, that without the power to perish, they should die every day and revive by night, and therefore a fierce contest occurs daily between them and the sun. At this season, pious Brahmanas scatter water, purified, at this season meaning at the Sandhya, or the twilight, the morning and the evening twilights. Pious Brahmanas scatter water purified by the mystical Omkara and consecrated by the Gayatri. And by this water, as by a thunderbolt, the foul fiends, the Mandehas, are consumed that harass the sun at the twilights. When the first oblation is offered with solemn invocations in the morning rite, the 1,000-rayed deity shines forth with unclouded splendor. Omkara is Vishnu the mighty, the substance of the 3 Vedas, the lord of speech, and by its enunciation those Rakshasas are destroyed. The sun is a principal part of Vishnu, and light is his immutable essence, the active manifestation of which is excited by the mystic syllable Om. Light effused by the utterance of Omkara becomes radiant, and burns up entirely the Rakshasas called Mandehas. The performance of the Sandhya, the morning yajna, must never therefore be delayed, for he who neglects it is guilty of the murder of the sun. Protected thus by the Brahmanas, and the pygmy sages called the Valakilyas, the sun goes on his course to give light to the world. 15 twinklings of the eye, nimeshas, and nimesha literally means a blink of the eye, and is the shortest Sanskrit unit of time, make a kashta. 30 kashtas, a kala. 30 kalas, a muhurta, which is 48 minutes in our measurement. So a kala is about 1.6 minutes. And 30 muhurtas, a day and night. The portions of the day are longer or shorter, as has been explained, but the sandhya is always the same in increase or decrease, being only one muhurta. From the period that a line may be drawn across the sun, or that half his orb is visible, in other words, when the sun, so to the expiration of 3 muhurtas, or 2 hours and 24 minutes, that interval is called pratar, or morning, forming a 5th oration of the day. The next portion, or 3 muhurtas from morning, is termed sangava, the forenoon. The next 3 muhurtas constitute midday. The afternoon comprises the next 3 muhurtas. The 3 muhurtas following are considered as the evening. And the 15 muhurtas of the day are thus classed in 5 portions of 3 each. But the day consists of 15 muhurtas, as given like this, only at the equinoxes, increasing or diminishing in number in the northern and southern declinations of the sun when the day encroaches on the night or the night upon the day. The equinoxes occur in the seasons of spring and autumn, when the sun enters the signs of Aries and Libra. When the sun enters Capricorn at the winter solstice, his northern progress commences, and his southern progress commences when he enters Cancer at the summer solstice. 15 days of 30 muhurtas each are called a paksha, or a lunar fortnight. 2 of these make a month, and 2 months a solar season, 3 seasons a northern or southern declination, or an ayana, and those 2 comprise a year. Years made up of the 4 kinds of months are distinguished into 5 kinds, and an aggregate of all the varieties of time is termed a yuga, or cycle. The years are severally called samvatsara, parivatsara, idvatsara, anuvatsara, and vatsara. And these are the units which comprise the great cycle of time called a yuga. So as for the kinds of months they're referred to, there are Saura months, which are solar sidereal months, which consist, 1 Saura month consists of the sun's passage through 1 sign of the zodiac. There is the Somya month, or Chandra month, a lunar month, which comprises 30 lunar tithis. Normally, that's counted from new moon to new moon, though you can also count it from full moon to full moon. There is a Savana month, or a solar but non-sidereal month, which consists of 30 days as defined by sunrise and sunset. And the 4th type of month is the nakshatra month, which is the moon's revolution through one of the nakshatras. The mountain range that lies most to the north in Bharatavarsha is called Sringavan, the Horned Mountains, from its having 3 principal elevations, the horns or peaks, one to the north, one to the south, and one in the center. The last is called the equinoctial horn, where the sun arrives there in the middle of the 2 seasons of spring and autumn, entering the equinoctial points in the 1st degree of Aries and of Libra, and making day and night of equal duration over exactly 15 muhurtas each. When the sun, most excellent sage, is in the 1st degree of the lunar mansion Kritaka, and the moon is in the 4th degree of the nakshatra Vishakha, or when the sun is in the 3rd degree of Vishakha and the moon is in the head of Kritaka, these positions being what occur at the equinoxes, that equinoctial season is holy and is styled the Mahavishnubha, or the Great Equinox. At this time, offerings are to be presented to the gods and to the Pitris, and gifts are to be made to the Brahmanas by serious persons, for such donations are productive of happiness. Liberality at the equinoxes is always advantageous to the donor, and day and night, seconds, minutes, and hours, intercalary months, the Purnamasi, or the day of the full moon, the Amavasya, the day of conjunction when the moon rises invisible. Conjunction, of course, being the conjunction of the Earth and the Moon, which is what produces the new moon. The day when it is first seen, Sinivali, meaning the day when the first sliver of a crescent moon is seen after the dark moon. The day when it first disappears, Kuhu, the day when the moon is quite round, Raka, and the day when one digit is deficient, the Anumati, are all seasons when gifts are meritorious. The sun is in his northern declination in the months, and here we are given the older Vedic names of the months. These names are almost all obsolete and have been replaced with a different set of Sanskrit names for the same months. But here, Parashara gives the older system of the months Tapas, Tapasya, Madhu, Madhava, Shukra, and Shuchi, and in his southern, in the months of Nabhas, Nabhasya, Isha, Urja, Sahas, and Sahasya. These correspond with the later system of the names of the lunar months: Magha, Palguna, Chaitra, Vaishaka, Jyeshta, Asharadha, Bhadra, Ashvina, Kartika, Agrahayana, and Posha. It's just two different sets of names for the same lunar months. On the Lokaloka mountain, which I have formerly described to you, the outer mountain barrier between the world and outside the world, reside the four holy protectors of the world, or Sudhaman and Shankapada, the two sons of Kardama Prajapati, and Hiranyaroman and Ketumat. Unaffected by the contrasts of existence, void of selfishness, active and unencumbered by dependence, they take charge of the lokas, themselves abiding on the four cardinal points of the Lokaloka mountain. On the north of Agastya and south of the line of the goat, exterior to the Vaishvanara path, lies the road of the Pitris. There dwell the Maharshis, the offerers of oblations with fire, reverencing the Vedas, after whose injunctions creation commenced, and who were discharging the duties of ministrant priests. For as the worlds are destroyed and renewed, they institute new rules of conduct and reestablish the interrupted ritual of the Vedas. Mutually descending from each other, progenitor springing from descendant and descendant from progenitor in the alternating succession of births. They repeatedly appear in different houses and races along with their posterity, devout practices and instituted observances, residing to the south of the solar orb, as long as the moon and the stars endure. The path of the Devas lies to the north of the solar sphere, north of the Nagaviti, and south of the Saptarishis. The Nagaviti and the Saptarishis here referring to constellations in the sky. There dwell the Siddhas of subdued senses, continent and pure, undesirous of progeny, and therefore victorious over death. 88,000 of these chaste beings tenant the regions of the sky north of the sun until the destruction of the universe. They enjoy immortality for that they are holy, exempt from covetousness and concupiscence, love and hatred, taking no part in the procreation of living beings and detecting the unreality of the properties of elementary matter. By immortality is meant existence to the end of the kalpa. Life as long as the three regions of earth, sky, and heaven last is called exemption from death. The consequences of acts of iniquity or piety, such as Brahmanacide or an Ashvamedha, endure for a similar period, until the end of a kalpa, when all within the interval between Dhruva and the earth is destroyed, including even the so-called immortals. The space between the Saptarishis and Dhruva, the third region of the sky, is the splendid celestial path of Vishnu, the Vishnupada, and the abode of those sanctified ascetics who are cleansed from every soil. Soil here meaning pollution or dirtiness, cleansed from every impurity, and in whom virtue and vice are annihilated. This is that excellent place of Vishnu, to which those repair in whom all sources of pain are extinct, in consequence of the cessation of the consequences of piety or iniquity, and where they never sorrow more. There abide Dharma, Dhruva, and other spectators of the world, radiant with the superhuman faculties of Vishnu acquired through religious meditation, and there are fastened and inwoven to all that is and all that shall ever be, animate or inanimate. The seat of Vishnu is contemplated by the wisdom of the yogis, identified with supreme light as the radiant eye of heaven. And that may not be obvious to most readers, but that was almost an exact quote from the Rig Veda there, that the seat of Vishnu is contemplated by the wisdom of the sages as the radiant eye of heaven. That is a direct line from the Rig Veda. In this portion of the heavens of splendid Dhruva is stationed and serves for the pivot of the atmosphere, or the pivot of Bhuvarloka. On Dhruva rest the 7 great planets, and on them, meaning they depend upon him, not that they literally physically rest on him in some sense, and on them depend the clouds, the Mega Devas, or the cloud spirits. The rains are suspended in the clouds, and from the rains come the water, which is the nutriment and delight of all, the Devas and the rest. And they, the Devas, who are the receivers of oblations, being nourished by burnt offerings, cause the rain to fall for the support of created beings. This sacred station of Vishnu, therefore, is the support of the 3 worlds, as it is the source of rain. From that 3rd region of the atmosphere, or of Bhuvarloka, the seat of Vishnu, proceeds the stream that washes away all sin, the river Ganga, embrowned with the unguents of the Apsaras of heaven who have sported in her waters. Having her source in the nail of the great toe of Vishnu's left foot, Dhruva receives her and sustains her day and night devoutly on his head. And thence the Saptarishis practice the exercises of austerity in her waters, wreathing their braided locks with her waves. The orb of the moon, encompassed by her accumulated current, derives augmented luster from her contact. Falling from on high as she issues from the moon, she alights on the summit of Meru, and thence flows to the 4 quarters of the earth for its purification. The Shira, Alakananda, Chakshu, and Bhadra, or elsewhere the former is called the Sita, are the 4 branches of but one river, divided according to the regions towards which it proceeds. Since the great waterfall from the moon lands in the center of the city of Brahma on the mesa on the top of Mount Meru, and there splits into 4, like spreading out like a plus sign. The branch that is known as the Alakananda was borne affectionately by Mahadeva upon his head for more than 100 years, and was the river which raised to heaven the sinful sons of Sagara by washing their ashes. The offenses of any human who bathes in this river are immediately expiated, and unprecedented virtue is engendered. Its waters, offered by children to their ancestors in faith for 3 years, yield to the ancestors rarely attainable gratification. Men of the twice-born orders, in other words, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, who offer sacrifice in this river to the Lord of sacrifice, Purushottama, obtain whatever they desire either here or in heaven. Saints who are purified from all soil, again, soil here meaning impurity, by bathing in its waters, and whose minds are intent on Keshava, acquire thereby final liberation. This sacred stream, heard of, desired, seen, touched, bathed in, or hymned day by day, sanctifies all beings, and those who even at a distance of 100 leagues exclaim Ganga, Ganga, atone for the sins committed during 3 previous lives. The place whence this river proceeds, for the purification of the 3 worlds, is the 3rd division of the celestial regions, the seat of Vishnu. Chapter 9. The form of the mighty Hari which is present in heaven, consisting of the constellations, is that of a porpoise, with Dhruva situated in the tail. As Dhruva revolves, it causes the moon, sun, and stars to turn round also, and the lunar asterisms follow in its circular path. For all the celestial luminaries are in fact bound to the polar star by aerial cords. The porpoise-like figure of the celestial sphere is upheld by Narayana, who himself, in planetary radiance, is seated in its heart, whilst the son of Uttanapada, Dhruva, in consequence of his adoration of the Lord of the world, shines in the tail of the stellar porpoise. The upholder of the porpoise-shaped sphere is the sovereign of all, Janardana. This sphere is the supporter of Dhruva, and by Dhruva the sun is upstayed. Upon the sun depends this world, with its devas, demons, and humans. In what manner the world depends upon the sun, be attentive and you shall hear. During 8 months of the year, the sun attracts the waters, which are the essence of all fluids, and then pours them upon the earth during the other 4 months as rain. In other words, by causing by the seasons of the sun influencing the climate, causing the evaporation of water, the condensation of clouds, and the monsoon, of course. From rain grows corn. By corn here, we mean all crops, not specifically corn in the modern sense. And by corn, the whole world subsists. The sun with his scorching rays absorbs the moisture of the earth and with them nourishes the moon. The moon communicates through tubes of air its dews to the clouds, is referring to the subtle quality of soma, which being composed of smoke, fire, and wind or vapor, can retain the waters with which they are charged. They are therefore called abhras, because their contents are not dispersed. When, however, they are broken to pieces by the wind, then watery stores descend, blended and freed from every impurity by the sweetening process of time. The sun, Maitreya, exhales watery fluids from 4 sources: seas, rivers, the earth, and living creatures. The water that the sun has drawn up from the Ganga of the skies, he quickly pours down with his rays and without a cloud. And humans who are touched by this pure rain are cleansed from the soil of sin and never see Naraka. This is termed celestial ablution. That rain which falls whilst the sun is shining and without a cloud in the sky is the water of the heavenly Ganga shed by the solar rays. If, however, rain falls from a bright and cloudless sky whilst the sun is in the mansion of Kritaka and the other asterisms counted by odd numbers as the 3rd, 5th, etc., the water, although that of the Ganga of the sky, is scattered by the elephants of the quarters, not by the rays of the sun. It is only when such rain falls and the sun is in the even-numbered asterisms that it is distributed by his beams. The water which the clouds shed upon earth is in truth the ambrosia of living beings, for it gives fertility to the plants, which are the support of their existence. By this all vegetables grow and are matured and become the means of maintaining life. With them again, those humans who take the law for their light perform daily yajnas, and through them give nourishment to the devas. And thus, yajnas, the Vedas, the 4 Varnas with the Brahmanas at their head, all the residences of the gods, all the tribes of animals, the whole world, all are supported by the rains by which food is produced. But rain is evolved by the action of the sun is sustained by Dhruva, and Dhruva is supported by the celestial porpoise-shaped sphere which is one with Narayana. The porpoise, of course, its Sanskrit name is Shishumara. Narayana, the primeval existent and eternally enduring, seated in the heart of the stellar sphere, is the supporter of beings. Chapter 10. Parashara said, between the extreme northern and southern points, the sun has to traverse in a year 180 degrees ascending and descending. Meaning, of course, 180 degrees, 180 ascending and 180 descending, forming the 360 degrees of the circle. His car is presided over by divine Adityas, Rishis, heavenly singers and nymphs, meaning Gandharvas and Apsaras, Yakshas, Nagas, and Rakshasas, one of each being placed in the chariot in every month. The Aditya Dhatri, the sage Pulastya, the Gandharva Tumbaro, the Apsaras Kratustala, the Yaksha Ratakrit, the Naga Vasuki, and the Rakshasa Heti always reside in the sun's chariot in the month of Madhu or Chaitra as its 7 guardians. In the month of Vaishakha or Madhava, the 7 are the Aditya Aryamat, the sage Pulaha. Narada is the musician. Punji Kastali is the Apsaras. The Yaksha is Rataujas. The Naga is Kachanira. And the Rakshasa is Praheti. In the month of Shuchi or Jyeshta, the Aditya is Mitra, the deva of friendship. The sage is Atri. The Gandharva is Haha. The Apsaras is Mena. The Yaksha is Ratasvana. The Naga is Takshaka. And the Rakshasa is Paurusheya. In the month Sukra or Ashadha, the Aditya is Varuna. The sage is Vasishta. The Gandharva is Huhu. The Apsaras is Sahajanya. The Yaksha is Ratachitra. The Naga is simply named Naga. And the Rakshasa is Buddha. Evidently not the Graha Buddha, who is not a Rakshasa, but a Rakshasa of the same name. In the month of Nabhas, also called Sravana, the Aditya, who performs the service, is Indra himself. The sage is Angiras. The Gandharva is Visvavasu. The Apsaras is Pramlocha. The Yaksha is Srotas. And the Naga is Elapatra, and the Rakshasa is also named Elapatra. In the month of Bhadrapada, the Aditya is Vivasvat. The sage is Bhrigu. The Gandharva is Ugrasena. The Apsaras is Anumlocha. The Yaksha is Apurana. The Naga is Shankapala. And the Rakshasa is Vyaghara. In the month of Ashvina, the Aditya is Pushan. The sage is Gautama. The Gandharva is Suruchi. The Apsaras is Ghratachi. The Yaksha is Sushena. The Naga is Dhananjaya. And the Rakshasa is Vata. In the month of Kartika, the Aditya is Parjanya, the god of the rain cloud. The sage is Bharadvaja. The Apsara is Vishvavasu again. The Apsaras is Vishvachi. The Yaksha is Senajit. The Naga is Airavata. And the Rakshasa is Chapa. In Agrahayana or Margashirsha month, the Aditya is Ansu. The sage is Kashyapa. The Gandharva is Chitrasena. The Apsaras is Urvashi. The Yaksha is Tarkshya. The Naga is Mahapadma. And the Rakshasa is Vidyut. In the month of Pusha, the Aditya is Bhaga. The sage is Kratu. Gandharva is Uranayu. The Apsaras is Purvachiti. The Yaksha is Arishtanemi. The Naga is Karkotaka. And the Rakshasa is Spurja. These are the seven who abide in the orb of the sun, the glorious spirits who scatter light throughout the universe. In the month of Magha, the seven who are in the sun are the Deva Twashtri, the sage Jamadagni, the Gandharva Dhritarashtra, the Apsara Tilottama, the Yaksha Ratijit, the Naga Kambala, and the Rakshasa Brahmapeta. And lastly, those who abide in the sun in the month of Palguna. The Aditya is Vishnu in his Vamana avatara form. The sage is Vishvamitra. The Gandharva is Suryavarchas. The Apsara is Rambha. The Yaksha is Satyajit. The Naga is Ashvatara. And the Rakshasa is named Yagnupeta. In this manner, Maitreya, a troop of 7 celestial beings, supported by the energy of Vishnu, occupies during the several months the orb of the sun. The sages celebrate his praise, the sun's praise, and the Gandharva sings and the Apsara dances before him. The Rakshasa attends upon his steps. The Naga harnesses his steeds and the Yaksha trims the reins. The numerous pygmy sages, the Valakilyas, ever surround his chariot. The whole troop of 7, attached to the sun's car, are the agents in the distribution of cold, heat, and rain at their respective seasons. Radha, this is Skandha 2, chapter, that was chapter 10. Yes, there's a very strong link with Jyotish. Chapter 11. Maitreya said, "You have related to me, holy Guru, the 7 classes of beings who are ever present in the solar orb and are the causes of heat and cold. You have also described to me their individual functions, sustained by the energy of Vishnu, but you have not told me the duty of the sun himself. For if, as you say, the 7 beings in his sphere are the causes of heat, cold, and rain, how can it be also true, as you have before mentioned, that rain proceeds from the sun? Or how can it be asserted that the sun rises, reaches the meridian, or sets, if these situations be the act of these collective 7, and not Surya himself?" Parashara replied, "I will explain to you, Maitreya, the subject of your inquiry. The sun, though identified with the 7 beings in his orb, is distinct from them as their chief. The entire and mighty energy of Vishnu, which is called the 3 Vedas, or the Rik, Yajus, and Saman, is that which enlightens the world and destroys its iniquity. It is that also which, during the continuance of things, is present as Vishnu, actively engaged in the preservation of the universe and abiding as the 3 Vedas within the sun. The solar luminatory that appears in every month is nothing else than that very supreme energy of Vishnu, which is composed of the 3 Vedas, influencing the motions of the planet. For the Riks, which are the hymns of the Rig Veda, shine in the morning, the prayers of the Yajush at noon, and the Brihadra Tantara and other portions of the Saman in the afternoon. This triple impersonation of Vishnu, distinguished by the titles of the 3 Vedas, is the energy of Vishnu, which influences the positions of the sun. In this context of the solar cycles, the Atharva Veda is not mentioned because it pertains more to the night and is less connected to the sun. But this triple energy of Vishnu is not limited to the sun alone, for Brahma, Purusha, and Rudra are also made up of the same triform essence. In creation, it is Brahma, consisting of the Rig Veda. In preservation, it is Vishnu, composed of the Yajur Veda, and in destruction, Rudra, formed of the Sama Veda, the utterance of which is consequently inauspicious. And for that reason, the formulae of the Samaveda are not to be used along with those of the Rik and the Yajus at yajnas in general. A yajna might use the Rig Veda and the Yajur Veda and so on, but the Samaveda is kept separate. Thus, the energy of Vishnu, made up of the 3 Vedas and derived from the property of goodness, presides in the sun, along with the 7 beings belonging to it. And through the presence of this power, the Graha, here planet, since we're talking about the sun, is not exactly a correct translation of Graha. The Surya Graha shines with intense radiance, dispersing with his beams the darkness that spreads over the whole world. And hence the Munis praise him. The choristers and nymphs of heaven sing and dance before him, the Gandharvas and Apsaras, and the fierce spirits and holy sages attend upon his path. Vishnu, in the form of his active energy, never either rises or sets, and is at once the 7-fold sun and distinct from it. In the same manner, as a man approaching a mirror placed upon a stand beholds in it his own image, so the energy or reflection of Vishnu is never disjoined from the sun's chariot, which is the stand of the mirror, but remains month by month in the sun as in the mirror, which is there stationed. The sovereign sun, O Brahman, the cause of day and night, perpetually revolves, affording delight to the gods, to the Prajapatis, and to humankind. Cherished by the Sushumna ray of the sun, the moon is fed to the full in the fortnight of its growth, and in the fortnight of its wane, in other words, that the moonlight is reflected sunlight. And in the fortnight of its wane, the ambrosia of its substance is perpetually drunk by the immortals, until the last day of the half month, when the 2 remaining digits are drunk by the Prajapatis, or by the progenitors in this case, meaning the Pitris. Hence, these 2 orders of beings are nourished by the sun. The moisture of the earth, which the sun attracts by his rays, he again parts with for the fertilization of the grain and the nutriment of all terrestrial creatures. And consequently, the sun is the source of subsistence to every class of living things, to devas, pitris, humankind, and the rest. The sun, Maitreya, satisfies the wants of the devas for a fortnight at a time, those of the pitris once a month, and those of humans and other animals daily. And this reference to the Sushumna ray of the sun, Parashara clearly knows that his Shishya Maitreya is familiar with it, but The Vayulinga and the Matsya Puranas all go into detail about the rays of the sun here, saying that there are many thousands of different types of rays of the sun, but 7 are principal, called the Sushumna, Harikesha, Vishvakarman, Vishvakarya, Sampadvasu, Arvavasu, and Swaraj, which provide the heat and the Shakti to the various other celestial grahas. I think this might be a good place to stop for today. It's almost 10 o'clock, and this does kind of summarize, but it also gets fairly into detail about the Chandra Loka, which is sort of bringing up a new subject. So I think I'm going to recommend that we pause here for today and get into chapter 12 at the start of next time. Yeah, thank you all very much for coming, guys.
Amazing. Thank you, Gabriel.
It was kind of a dense day, all about elaborate cosmology. And as was last week, and as also will be at least part of next week before we're through that section. But it's interesting material for sure.
Thank you so very much. As always, there's so much to absorb, and I'm just so thankful for all that you do. All that you do. Like every time we hear, and then sometimes I go back into the YouTube, going back to just see what I missed. Even listening to it, so yeah, here and there, it is just wonderful. I'm just so grateful that you're doing this, right? Yep. And I had asked you a question in the WhatsApp. You can reply to it later.
Oh, sorry, I must have missed it. I'll take a look.
It was just before we started.
Oh, so, today. Okay.
Yes. So it was more of asking your permission to let the Paramarth people know that.
Oh, yes, please, go ahead.
So I was asking your permission to take a screenshot of our screen so that I can send them what you look like.
Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So they can spot you and they can take care of it.